Hello everyone. Please let me know if the sound is good, if you're over here in the live chat. So, my name is Oser. This is Status Coup. So for those of you who are just tuning in, never heard of Status Coup before, we are a news media outlet. I am not the only journalist on board. And we are streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/statuscoup. And we're also streaming live on a podcast app called All Real Radio. So we're doing both, and I'm glad to have all of you. If you have any questions, which we will be taking questions at the end, please drop them in the YouTube comments when I give you the cue. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and start off the stream. We are interviewing. Sounds pretty good. Okay, good. Sound is good. Sound is good. We're good. Okay, so we are interviewing adjunct Professor Pat Huff from the University of St. Thomas. We're going to discuss how the national goal in public education is to privatize public education. And both parties are complicit in this privatization. It's very, very scary what's going on. We're going to be talking about how the Texas Education Agency has been flexing some fascism. They have been going after democratically elected board members and replacing boards, and we're also going to be talking about how our education system, especially the accountability system, is largely Orwellian. And we're also going to dive into student privacy and how student privacy isn't protected like we thought it was. He wrote a whole ass dissertation, and it's like he's done his research. So we're going to take it away. Pat, have at it.
Well, first of all, Sam, great to be back with you. I'm not sure how long ago it was that we talked once before. Maybe
it was a year ago.
Okay.
It was April 2018.
Yeah. So I really appreciate you bringing me back, and It's a great time to be talking about what's happening in education because of primarily what's happening with HISD. And for those out there that are familiar with the probable takeover of the school board, the elected members of the school board and being replaced by a board of managers by the Texas Education Agency under the direction of Commissioner Mike Morath and his band of sidekicks that he calls his co-commissioners or assistant commissioners. They are dismantling as much as they can public education under the rights of the people and replacing it with you used the word fascist, not too far off from that, yes, a combination of the public interest and corporate interest blending together to form the future of what public education is going to look like. And right now, ground zero in that fight is HISD. And there's been some many fights over what the issues are and should be, and I am not an expert. And as we go through some of the when I say I'm not an expert on HISD. There are many people out there that could contribute in far better ways than I can. But what is getting HISD in trouble is the accountability system. Okay, the accountability testing, teaching to the test, teach for a rating, all of that. Okay, that goes along with all of the evil that is attached to that, and all of the, and I will say, all of the interests that come into that for the purpose, under the guise of working for the children, but under the truthful knowledge of making children a commodity and making money. And there are those out there that would very much be opposed to that, what I just said. But as we go along today, maybe we can convince the public out there that this is indeed what is taking place. And let me just, before we go any further, because I don't want to step on toes today with the university that I really have come to love working for, and it's the University of St. Thomas. My views today do not represent St. Thomas whatsoever.
That's a good preface.
I teach the practical there. I'm one of several teachers, professors that teach the practical, which is, it's kind of like student teaching for administration. You're getting the teacher at the tail end of their master's program, and they're in their practical, which is kind of like when you're in undergraduate work and you're going into your student teaching.
Yeah.
You're preparing to become a teacher, where these teachers are preparing to become administrators. And I get to work with the ones that I'm given to work with, and I love it. We move them through the rigors of the program and hopefully get them on the other side and get them ready to move into that world of school administration. But what I especially love about it is being able to share with them and get them ready for what they're getting ready to face when it comes to working within a different area. As a teacher, they're involved tremendously in the accountability from the standpoint of trying to get their kids to move toward better outcomes, because that's now a part of the evaluation system for each teacher. And when they move into administration, then they're going to be feeling the pressure then to move those teachers in that direction. And so you kind of become part of the machine that is contributing to what is taking place.
Yeah.
And so you have to be ready for that, and how are you going to deal with that mentally? Because you don't get too far into it until you realize that you've got to adopt a certain attitude about the whole testing regimen and the whole testing program, and not put so much pressure on the teacher that they then in turn give that pressure to the student.
Yeah.
And then they feel it.
So the machine and all the stuff happening with education, can we go to where did this, the history of it? So I know there was a lot to do with Clinton. So how did we get to the point where we are now as far as standardized testing and just this privatization of public education?
Yeah. So we're going to try to lay a groundwork for why we're moving into a privatization movement or agenda. Just when I think, Sam, we're at the end game, it's not the end game.
Yeah.
And it continues.
Yeah.
So where it's going now is it's moving into a privatization corporate model that is going to involve elected school board members being removed and boards of managers being put in under the guise of not being able to meet state accountability. The public would not permit or approve of the state coming in and taking over in that manner unless they felt that there was a crisis at hand and they have to do it.
A manufactured crisis.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what I stood up and said at the HFT meeting here, the Houston Federation of Teachers meeting that was held recently. And I pointed out that it's a manufactured myth that we have school failure. Manufactured myth. And how that is if you can create a system where you can put a metric to it and say that this school is good and this school is bad based upon standardized test outcomes, then you can make a declaration of schools that need to be taken over because under the guise of the kids aren't learning.
Right.
We have to do it. We owe it to the children. The outcomes on the test do not in any way determine and show what that kid knows.
Mm-mm.
The only thing it shows is that that kid learned how to take a test. Now, sure, there will be things that the teacher does in their preparation for the child to take the test, but all is under the guise of preparation to get the student ready to take a test on a given day, and then regurgitate that information that they've learned into the test. We all know that when you take a standardized test, two answers can be thrown out.
Yeah.
And then two are similar. And so you take a good stab at what the right answer might be.
Yeah, so I am obviously a millennial, and I'm on the younger end of millennials. Like I'm a cusper between millennial and Gen Z. And we had a saying in school, it's like, if you don't know the answer, just choose C. Because, like, I mean, if you just don't, like, just randomly choose, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. It was very defeating.
Well, and so we have been in this education crisis now for about 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if we can keep that crisis going, then we can keep making money.
This manufactured crisis.
Manufactured crisis, right. Now, in any corporate model, if you haven't solved your problems within 35 years, I would call you a failure.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah, right?
Well, they haven't, and they haven't solved the problems because of the way it's designed. You'll never solve problems.
Yeah.
Ever. Because of the way you designed it.
Yeah.
So it's designed to fail. It's different. It's designed to fail certain Title I schools that cannot meet the accountability measures that are put in place.
Can we unpack what Title I means?
Okay. Title I is a designation that has to do with the number of students that you have attending your school that receive free and reduced lunch.
Mm.
So at the beginning of the year, remember, all the kids fill out that form, and they take the form home and the parents fill it out, and they bring it back, and it gives the income of the family, and there's a certain income that is required to be able to get a free or reduced lunch, and then that determines your Title I status. And I can't remember what the percentage is now because it's changed.
Right.
But that's what Title I is, and so you're able to receive federal money,
Mm-hmm.
federal money for kids to be able to eat.
Right. Title I's essentially like a poor school.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But within every school, you've got kids that qualify. It's just when your percentage of those kids that qualify reach a certain level, then the designation of that school shifts from being non-Title I to Title I.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And you know, as we go down the road, we have more and more kids more and more schools qualifying for that number. And what that means is that they come under federal. Of course, all schools come under federal jurisdiction. The fact that states have control over their education agendas is a real misnomer. If any governor were to say, okay, we're done with standardized testing, we're not going to do it anymore, it's detrimental to the child, it hasn't worked, it's proven that it hasn't worked, we're going to ditch it.
Yeah.
And we're going to go back to a model that returns teaching to the teacher. And we're going to have a set of essential elements that's in play, and we're not going to have testing that produces a rating at that school and determines which school is good and which one is bad.
Yeah.
If they ever did that, I think the full weight of the federal government would come down on that governor so hard that they would change their mind pretty quick.
Yeah.
Now, let me take you back, if I could, to the 90s.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Let's kind of give people a frame of reference for the psychology that's involved in all of this. One of the worst things that TEA did under the direction of, the governor controls TEA. The governor appoints the commissioner. The commissioner never gets an evaluation. He never gets a rating, or she. We have had ladies that have been the commissioner before.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. He has tremendous power.
Yeah, that's a lot of power for one person to have with no review.
Back in the 90s, they came up with this plan, and you'll remember it, of rating schools by the outcomes on the test. And so schools were rated either exemplary, recognized, acceptable, or not acceptable.
And just for frame of reference for you guys, let's remember who was in control then. It was Clinton. Or, well, no, it was before that. It was before Clinton, too.
No, it was Clinton at the federal level.
At the federal level, okay.
And we had George W. coming on board as the governor of Texas.
Was there any so let's just talk like federally, like backdrop before we get into Texas. So both parties are dismantling public education. How does that look federally, like nationally, before we dive into Texas, the shitstorm that's happening down here?
It's not too much different.
Yeah.
In other states, there are differences between them, but overall, charter schools are expanding greatly. Laws are being written that allow for charter schools to be established.
Yes.
All right. Now that's a whole different program, but keep in mind that we have to define what that is. And a charter school is a public school because it gets public tax money. It gets public
funding, yeah.
Okay. But it's also a private school because you have corporate interests that funnel lots and lots of money.
And we're seeing this a lot, not just in education, but in nonprofit type situations. Like they're called partnerships. Like there's a park over here down the road that is a partnership between public and private, and they marry the two.
Right.
And that's been a relatively new thing. It hasn't it, or has it been like around and it's just starting to?
It's relatively new. If you want to, but I would say that within the last 15 years, it's begun to take hold and really increase throughout business and education. And that's where you use the term fascism, because with fascism, you conjure up images of Mussolini and Hitler and all the things that are...
Yeah, it's not necessarily that. In this case, it's very corporate based.
Yeah. And it's driven by a profit margin. And can you justify to your stakeholders that you're making money and they're making money?
Yeah, the politicians are the ones having to justify to their stakeholders, the corporations, whether or not the bills that they've put in are actually making the money.
Right.
Private prisons, healthcare, and now private education.
Right. There you go.
Yeah.
So in the 90s, we had this rating come out. And it was benign somewhat, unless you were on the non-acceptable end of it. But nobody wanted to be acceptable. That wasn't good either. And there became an idea in the public's mind that we have good schools and we have bad schools. That's the worst thing that could have ever happened.
And it didn't just become. There was like a PR movement type thing, right? Where whoever was the education secretary then, they actually implemented PR structure to make people start thinking.
Sure. Yeah.
Good, bad,
Right.
Very binary, very boxy.
Yeah. And so, everybody fell into this trap. Teachers fell into the trap. Principals fell into the trap. I fell into that trap. All right.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate. In my career, I worked in Aldine, Conroe, and Klein. And 19 years in Klein, I was an assistant principal and a principal. And the two schools that I was principal over were such that we earned exemplary ratings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that was during the days of TOS. Remember TOS?
Yeah, I remember hearing about TOS, but I did not have to do TOS.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were in the tax.
Yeah, I was tax.
You were tax.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was a more difficult test. All right. When schools got their rating, it was a badge of honor. Badge of honor.
Yeah, you put that in quotes, guys. Badge of honor.
To put on your building that
Yeah.
you were an exemplary school, rated by the Texas Education Agency.
That's what the stars mean on the schools.
Yes, the dates that they put on
The
it.
dates that they put on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you'll note, those schools that were exemplary and recognized, all of that ended around 2010.
Okay.
There are no dates after 2010.
Interesting.
Yeah, because, and I'll tell you why in just a minute.
Yeah.
But, so that put the idea in the public's mind that there are good schools and bad, and we're still doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Wheatley's bad. Wheatley's bad. We got to get in there and take over HISD because Wheatley's bad. They're not doing their job. They're not. Those teachers over there are horrible.
And so whenever they're like rating to determine if schools are good or bad, they're doing it based off these test results. Right. And so like there's no other way that they're gauging it. And like these test results are directly tied to profit. Right, because there are people who profit off the tax. There are people who profit
Big
off the
tax.
STAR, people who profit off standardized testing.
And here's how they profit. This is hard to wrap your brain around, but nationwide, the testing program, the education, everything that goes into education, public education, is a $500 billion a year industry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's nuts.
That's, I can't even imagine, okay? Well, when a school is labeled and they're in trouble and they're scrambling to get out of trouble with TEA, then they're looking for that magic bullet that is going to improve their outcomes and move their kids forward and out of trouble.
Yeah.
It used to be called improvement required. That was a term that came in with No Child Left Behind. If you didn't measure up, we were no longer in the exemplary to needs of, that acceptable and all that.
Yeah.
We were either you met standards or you failed to meet standards. And if you failed, then you were labeled improvement required. And when that happened, it opened up a floodgate of people that they were a vendor and they could come in. The state had given them the right to come in and sell products to different school districts that needed them. And there was no indication that any of these products were going to do any good. Mm-hmm. But principals and superintendents are looking for that magic bullet that's going to help pull them out.
Right.
And the bad thing about it is it's all about improving testing outcomes.
Yeah, yeah.
And so there's no real true indication of what the child learned. If you want to know what a child learned for that year, you know who you go to? Two people. The teacher and the parent. Teacher, parent.
That
That's
makes
it.
logical sense.
Sure it does. Yeah.
But that's not measurable, right? There's no data in that. And if there's no data, like there's no profit.
There you go. There is a certain senator that sits on the education committee. Everybody in Houston knows him as Paul Bettencourt.
Ew.
And love him or hate him, one of his famous lines that he loves to use is, if you can measure it, you can fix it. But really what that should say is, if you can measure it, you can make money off of it.
Yeah.
Think about it. Let's use logic here. Think logically. Anything that you can measure, you can make money off of. If you measure electricity, if you measure water, oil, you name it. If you can put a metric behind it, then you can make money off of it. And so that's exactly what is being done with education.
Yeah.
So much so that we're moving now into Wall Street. The commissioner has established a director of social impact bonds, what they call SIBs.
Okay, what are those?
Social impact bonds, and I'm not the expert in this, there are people that are much smarter than me, but it's a way that people can invest in school districts and individual schools in the programs that are put in there making a difference and raising outcomes. And if outcomes go up, then profits are made. Mm-hmm. If they go down, then no profits are made, and there could be a loss. So it's kind of like a betting machine. But it's once again, it is turning the student into a commodity.
Yeah.
And whenever that happens, then we're using those children in a way that it's akin to child abuse because of the pressure that's going to be placed on that child to perform.
Right.
I hate that word, performance.
Yeah. So we've been kind of like straying away a little bit, but so
it's easy to do.
Yes, it is because there's a lot of different rabbit holes. But so we talked about the '90s briefly, about like how Democrats started this. How did How did George Bush carry what Clinton did?
Yeah.
So there was from Clinton to Bush to Obama to now. What does those monkey bars look like? And let's try to keep with the timeline.
Yeah. Okay, that's good because that's a good segue into No Child Left Behind.
Yes.
The man who brought all those accountability measures in, it was George W. Bush in Texas.
Okay.
So his plan, his education plan, went to D.C. when he was elected president. Mm-hmm. Now, let's be honest. George Bush didn't write No Child Left Behind. But he's the face on the cereal box, all right?
Yeah, he is.
And he's the one who promoted it and was the PR man behind it. So we have to lay it on him, and he deserves to have it laid on him. But there were instrumental other people that brought into play No Child Left Behind. What it did, this was in 2002, No Child Left Behind put the federal government in the state accountability picture for the first time. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, it was only states that determined what their accountability measures were going to be. Those measures had to be approved by the U.S. Department of Education. Okay. The states were more free to be flexible in how they use their accountability measures.
Right.
But they still had standardized testing. Okay, that goes back to the 80s.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So it was, just a gradual build-up.
Yeah, all these capitalism as we know it now, as far as I could tell, always goes back to the 80s. Always goes back to Reaganism. So like every single facet, you'll see, like if you continue to follow my reporting, every time we go back in history and talk about capitalism as we know it now, it goes back to Reagan. It's creepy, but anyway.
Well, I'll throw a monkey wrench into that. It wasn't so much Reagan.
Yeah.
As it was George Bush.
As it was George Bush.
Yeah, Poppy Bush.
Poppy Bush.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was really in charge.
Oof.
Mm-hmm. So when we look at No Child Left Behind, it put the federal government into the accountability picture, and it brought in two areas of subpopulations into the accountability work. And when I say subpopulations, I'm talking groups of kids who look like each other. Mm-hmm. So your ethnicities, mm-hmm. all the ethnicities that you had, and then you had economically disadvantaged kids. Those were your kids that were Title I, even located in schools that were not Title I. Okay, because every school had poor kids.
Yeah.
Unless you were Highland Park. That's in Dallas. And it's 100% no economically disadvantaged kids.
Okay.
So it's really skewed. I have a lot of good friends that live up there, though, so it's good people. Where the accountability picture added two very important subgroups. English language learners, okay? Immigrants that did not speak the language. And that wasn't necessarily Hispanic. Mm-hmm. It could have come from anywhere in the world.
Right.
All right. And special education. So your subgroup of special education kids were now a group that was grouped together, mm-hmm. that got measured on how well they did on the state test. Now, what happened midway through No Child Left Behind, or toward the end of No Child Left Behind, is that a very significant thing happened in special ed. And that was that the number of kids that you could protect from not taking the state test went from 3% in your special ed population to 1%. And so that meant that only the kids that had the most severe disabilities were the ones that you could protect from not having to take the regular standardized test.
Okay.
Right. So that meant that every other kid that had a learning disability went into the regular classroom and had to take the regular test. All right. So when you're looking at a school like Wheatley, and
so for just a quick moment,
sure.
For those of you watching nationally, and you're not in Texas, you're not in Houston, Wheatley is a Title I school, right?
Correct.
Title I high school in Houston. It's been one of the schools at the center of this whole Texas Education Agency taking over Houston HISD. Wheatley's been like really at the forefront, so Wheatley's going to be an example that we use, and then you can make parallels to schools around you.
Right. Okay. So in every urban environment, we have schools that struggle more than others, and there's a reason why they do, and we're going to get into that. And I think it's going to be very enlightening to the folks out there. So Wheatley High School, there used to be 10 schools that were on the chopping block, that were had the bullseye on their back,
right,
from TEA, and then that got narrowed down, in a matter of a couple of years to
mm-hmm.
one,
with a lot of pushback from the community.
Right, and Mike Morath, the Texas Education mm-hmm. Commissioner, would not give Wheatley a pass. Continued to label it as a failure. Now, does that mean that nobody's getting an education at Wheatley? Heavens no. Heavens no.
Yeah.
Teachers over there are working their butts off to do the very best job that they can.
Yeah. And
they have tremendous challenges that they deal with. And so we'll talk about those in a minute. But when we're talking about special education being a really tough area to deal with for all the public schools, is because so many of them that used to be protected and not having to take the state tests now have to take it. So that means they're and this is a good and a bad, okay? Boy, we can try to stay on target is really tough.
Yeah.
But for a kid to really get a good education, mm-hmm. they're going to need to be in the regular classroom.
Yeah.
All right. That's where they're going to get the best, have the chance of getting the best public education is in the regular classroom. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, we used to have what we called resource classes, and these were kids that had disabilities to the point that they were arted through the art committee into a resource class, and it was at a lower level, basic instruction, okay? And they were not in the regular class, and therefore did not have to take the standardized test, all right? They had another test that they took, but it didn't count toward accountability rating.
Okay.
All right. Well, so there are a lot of parents out there with special education kids that celebrated those classes being dissolved. And I understand why, okay, because it really was a dumbed down situation. The curriculum was not near as difficult.
Yeah.
For some of those kids, they did better there. And when they got moved into the regular ed classroom, they had much more of a challenge. But those same parents would argue with you that that challenge was good.
Okay.
And that they rose to the occasion.
Yeah.
And were better able to be prepared for life with more knowledge, right? But what it did for the regular education teacher is it put more kids in their classrooms that needed modifications to be made into the curriculum, and accommodations that the other kids didn't get, but these kids did get because of their disabilities.
Right, so they integrated what you called the resource classes?
They took those away.
They took those away, so whenever they took those away, it integrated with like the regular. So that's why like we see, so I was a teacher assistant for a couple of years because I was thinking about being a teacher, and I remember, there's like a classroom of 30 to 40 kids at like one time, right? Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, on top of meeting TEKs, which that's a conversation. On top of that, there is also, out of the 30, 40 students in reality that you had in your classroom, about 5 to 10 of them would have accommodations. So on top of teaching the curriculum, meeting TEKs, tests, printing, blah, 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 you also had to take into account these accommodations, which makes your life so much harder.
Yeah.
As a teacher.
And do you have the help that you need to be able to?
Oh God, no, never. They never do.
Yeah.
They never ever do.
And so you might have an assistant that comes in there, a teacher aide that comes in, or you might have a co-teacher that comes in who's actually a teacher with special education certification, and they have the ability to come in and actually co-teach with that teacher. But who they're mainly concentrating on are the special ed kids. And that's the ideal. That's what you should have. That's what you want to have. But guess what?
That doesn't happen.
Money.
Yeah.
It's very expensive. Okay, so you're talking, instead of one teacher being in there, you got 2. And say the teacher is making $50,000 plus a year, and so that's an extra $50,000 that is added to that classroom. And so you multiply that over a number of times, and you've got budgets that are really going up. All that said, okay?
Going back to Child Left Behind.
All that said, it's a difficult subpopulation to meet accountability with.
Right.
All right.
So we didn't really, we started talking about accountability system, but we didn't totally talk about how the accountability system is totally Orwellian. So we have the accountability system that's Orwellian. Let's unpack what that means. I know we kind of did with the ratings, but I don't know if it was clear. And then also, I'm sure there are other facets besides the accountability system that are also Orwellian. Yeah. So I'd like to go back into the Orwellian facets of our education system.
Okay. Well, it begins with the name that's attached to the bill. Okay. No Child Left Behind, right? I mean, all of these terms, they come right out of George Orwell's 1984. The Ministry of Truth, right? All those terms that were given to different facets of the government that actually, when you unpack it, it means just the opposite. And so, with No Child Left Behind, it has a catchy phrase. The new federal bill that was in 2015 is Every Child Succeeds Act, or Every Student Succeeds Act. Well, okay, do we know, does every student succeed? No. Is every child moving ahead and not being left behind? No. And so that's the beginning of understanding the Orwellian nature of all of this. And so you go back to George Orwell, Eric Blair, and you You understand what he was writing about and where he was getting his information from and what he was involved with in England at the time. And he really had he was able to almost peer into the future and see where things were headed. If you never watched the movie and of course you should read the book, but if you've never watched the movie, it's pretty eye-opening as well.
Yeah, it is.
It is. Richard Burton is in it, a number of other people prominent at the time. But with that said, it is very Orwellian, and the whole thing behind it is trying to make people believe that what is happening is good, but in reality, it's bad. Now, does that mean that every teacher that's working in the public education system is bad? No, not at all. They're doing the very best that they can under very challenging situations.
Right.
It means that the agenda, the leadership that is governing education
At the state and federal
at
level.
the state and federal level, I have no other word for it, Sam, except to say it's evil.
Yeah.
Because of what it's doing to children. See, we have what's called Texas education codes that are on the books. And my good friend Steve Swanson, that's in Austin, this guy is relentless in going before the congressman and telling them what their responsibilities are when it comes to public education. And they're not meeting their responsibilities because they're hurting children. And there are laws on the books right now, especially Chapter 11 of the Texas Education Code, and we're not going to unpack it today, but many provisions in there that
Very high level.
take us down a road of taking care of children, taking care of children, looking out for the best interest of children. When there are things that need to be addressed, Texas Education Agency is leading the way in helping that district solve their education problems. They're on the books,
Yeah.
but they're being ignored because there's another set of laws, Chapter 39, Chapter 39A, that speak to accountability. And those laws, those statutes that are on the books, have a hammer attached to them. And because they have a hammer attached to them, if you don't meet with what their guidelines are, then you get sanctioned.
Right.
And so what are you going to pay attention to? See, we've got this set of laws, and we've got this set of laws. What are we going to pay attention to? What are we going to operate in? What sphere of laws are we going to operate in? The one that has the penalties attached to it. Because if we don't, we're going to get cut down. And no school board wants that to happen to their district. No superintendent wants that to happen. When that happens, people lose their jobs. And new people are brought in to try to do better. Case in point, North Forest ISD that was dissolved in 2013 due to years and years of not meeting accountability. Every single professional employee in that district lost their job. The schools were dismantled, taken over by Houston Independent School District, and guess what? No teacher was hired by HISD.
Yeah.
Because why? They were seen as the problem. Well, guess what? Those schools are still having problems. They are still having problems. North Forest High School, if I'm not mistaken, failed to meet accountability again. I may be wrong on this last year, but I know the year before that, they did not make it. Why? Why are they still having trouble? I mean, if another district takes them over, aren't they going to do everything they can to bring them up to speed? Sure they are. They're going to try. But sometimes the challenges are too great to overcome.
Yeah.
And does that mean that no one is getting an education in that building or those buildings? No. It just means that the percentages of kids that you have coming to you with difficulties, whether it comes from the family, where they live, the neighborhood, the gangs, the drugs, whatever the case is, that have created learning gaps within the child. Mm-hmm. And believe me, if you have a learning gap, it ain't going to be caught up under the present system. You're going to get further and further behind.
Right, well that's the point. So, before we continue, diving into, more rabbit holes, let's try to snap back.
Okay.
Let's talk about, we talked about the accountability system being Orwellian. We talked about No Child Left Behind. Let's take a moment to talk about FERPA and student privacy, because as we've been talking about how data is important to profit. They're using data like means to fix it, but that's a lie. Like it's not means to fix it. That's an excuse to accumulate more data. So I remember last time we were talking about how it was actually the Obama administration that loosened FERPA. Could we elaborate on that?
Okay. It was either in 2015, 2016 that the laws were rewritten in FERPA so that it is much easier for that data to be given to third parties without parent consent. Mm-hmm. Don't ask me on the legal wording of how that happened. I don't have that in front of me, but those laws were, because see, as it was before, third parties couldn't get their hands on that data.
Yeah.
And so you weren't going to be able to profitize the data. You weren't going to be able to put it in a situation where it could be used and given to companies and then sold back as magic bullets for that district to be able to improve their outcomes. And so where this is really going to take us, since you brought up the data, mm-hmm. it's going to really take us into the brave new world of education.
Oh, scary.
Yeah.
So before we get into the brave new world of data, I want to show you guys an example of that playing out in real life. So again, this is local, where this one we're talking about is Pasadena, Texas, and you can use parallels to, whatever region you're in. But in Pasadena, Texas, Pasadena ISD School District implemented Summit Learning and has rebranded it as Pasadena Connect. But what they're not telling people is that this learning program is developed by engineers working for Mark Zuckerberg's wife, Chan Zuckerberg. It's his wife. It's Mark's and Chan's for-profit. It's called Summit Learning. It's a for-profit, and it's there's the idea of personalized learning, but it's being used to collect data. And in this case, Summit Learning partnered with the for-profit Chan Zuckerberg developed. Summit Learning is a nonprofit, and they partnered with this software done by Chan Zuckerberg to help really develop and flesh it all out. And I wanted to show you guys this is an actual web page on their website, on Summit Learning's website. That's the wrong one. Talking about data. Core set of commitments. 1, data used solely for educational purposes. 2, data is never for sale. 3, you own and control your data. 4, we go beyond compliance. 5, we practice privacy by design. 6, we only work with trusted partners. 7, we are committed to continuous improvement. And I really just want to show you guys that this is the first step of normalizing accumulating students' data. We have FERPA, people think that their kids' privacy is protected, but it is not. It hasn't been. And Obama was the one who did this loophole. So connecting Brave New World and 1984 Orwellian kind of stuff. Can we talk about personalized learning and like what that actually means? Yeah.
All right. So many districts now are going to what they call one-to-one, one device to one student, because this is where we're moving. Now that means that what it means is, and I brought this out in my book, that we're moving from the teacher being the teacher to the device being the teacher. So the device could be a laptop, it could be a Chromebook, whatever company is got the contract for that district, but it's their learning tool. All right, and within that is all the things that the child is deemed to need to know. The TEKs are in there for the teacher, the way that the lesson is to be taught is there for the teacher, and then the material, the actual academic information that is to be learned is in there as well. And then there are also remediation areas to go to. So let's say in math, having trouble with this particular problem, you're getting this many problems wrong, you need remediation here. That's not being done by the teacher, it's being done by the device. So it's going to become very myopic as we move forward here in the tunnel of the control. Hand me my book, if you will. The subtitle of my book, The Control of Information and Knowledge Through the Accountability System.
And we come full circle.
Yeah. So, this book is it's foundational to understanding how we got where we are. It doesn't have the newest laws in there. It doesn't have the newest accountability system that has come under since the new federal laws have been written. But it's foundational. So if people want to get that, they can find it at www.a as in Alan, P as in Patrick, Huff.com, Huff, aphuff.com. And it's really good. I think it's the more we go down this road of education, the more I appreciate the things that are in that book, and I kind of give myself a pat on the back. But it's foundational to understanding where we are now and where we're headed. So in terms of a brave new world, my goodness, the teacher is now being removed and the device is now taking over. And so that means multitudes of manipulation that can be done. Anything that device, anything that people that write programs for that device want the child to learn will be in there. And not only in there, but tested over. Yeah. And held accountable for. Now, this gets into a real touchy area, because there'll be things that are in there that go into the social emotional learning of the child. This is the latest thing, that schools are getting into, the social emotional learning. And you're dealing with areas that are going to divide the child and the parent over what they believe should be taught in the classroom, or the morals that should be taught by the family and are now being embedded into the classroom. And so that has huge ramifications for where society is going to go in terms of its just culture in general. Whatever you want to taught, whatever you want to teach, it'll be in there. Yeah. Whatever you want to promote, it'll be in there.
Yeah, and like it's already kind of so when I was a teacher assistant, just kind of going back to that for a moment, I was in a room full of books, full of workbooks, and I was like, why are there so many different workbooks? Why are there so many different text workbooks? And the teacher that I was helping, she told me that there's basically like trade shows, if you would, where districts go to these things, and all of these different companies have all their textbooks out for display. So you can like pick and choose which textbooks you actually want to use for your district. And that's when, we start seeing censorship, right? So when they say, oh, we got people from Africa to come work and pull cotton, when, it was like straight up slavery. And, but these books aren't talking about it. But these books are adjusting what they say according to what the district wants and where the district. It's targeted marketing. That's all it is. And this form of personalized learning, it takes it to the next level while accumulating data. It's crazy. So we have about 30 minutes left. In 20 minutes, I'll start asking if you guys have any questions. Obviously, if you're listening on the All Real Radio app, you can't drop a question, but if you go on youtube.com/statuscoup, you can drop a question and we'll take like 2 or 3. But yes, so we talked about No Child Left Behind and how that ties into the accountability system and how that's Orwellian. And then we went into, student privacy, and how Obama put in a loophole where third parties now have that. And then we connected it to like Brave New World in 1984. Are there any sort of things with privatization that people absolutely need to know?
It's going to be foisted upon us under the guise of improving the child and improving their ability to be productive citizens. Okay. That remains to be seen. Okay. Once again, we're being sold a bill of goods without knowing if it's going to work or not.
Their manufacturing consent.
Yeah. We don't know if it's going to work. They're going to take us there. There's nothing that is going to change this. It's moving forward. The only thing that could change it would be a governor standing up and saying, we're not going to do it. And appointing a commissioner that would support that. Mm-hmm. That's the only thing that would change it. Now the public can march down Congress Avenue until the cows come home. And they're not going to listen to it. They're going to move forward. And that's the evil part of it. Yeah. They're not listening to the people. They work for us, right? Mm-hmm. Don't they? Last time I checked. Well, the overwhelming people that you poll, if you were to poll them, detest the standardized test that is taking place and all the ramifications that go along with it. They detest it in the public schools, if they have any knowledge of it at all. Yeah. There are a lot of people that are a lot of people that are clueless to it because it doesn't interest them anymore. Their kids are grown, they're done, they're out of here. They view schools like they were back in the 60s or 70s. And nothing could be further from the truth. It's just a small percentage of people that are in the game that really, really understand what's happening.
Yeah.
Now, if I could, just in a few moments that we have left, mm-hmm. because we do have new people that are listening that didn't listen before.
Right.
What is really important for you to understand, for the public out there to understand, that we are in a manufactured crisis, is to understand what was written into No Child Left Behind. This is critical. This is foundational.
Yes.
Okay? And this is in my book. There was written into No Child Left Behind what I call a failure matrix. Okay. That was actually written in the days of the Clinton years. Okay. But it was held in check. It wasn't put in until No Child Left Behind was written. And then it was injected there. So the people who wrote No Child Left Behind like to divorce themselves of the AYP matrix of failure. And I understand that because it was really an evil component that was put in. But it's there nonetheless. And so we have to lump it in there with No Child Left Behind. But what it said, it required schools to be under what was called adequate yearly progress.
Okay.
And that meant that in those subpopulations like we talked about, you had to meet a certain percentage of kids that passed the test. And this percentage that had to be met was not what the kid had to make on the test, it was what the group made collectively as a percentage of kids passing the test. So in other words, your African American students, if the goal that year, the percentage that had to be met that year was 50% on English language arts and reading or in math, then that collectively is that group, that 50% of that group had to pass. All right? Well, an interesting thing happened on the way to 2014. Schools began failing in record numbers. I mean, it was you talk about a crisis. It was a bona fide, unbelievable crisis.
But it was by design.
It was by design, right? Because every year, that percentage that schools had to meet in each one of those subgroups went up. Okay, and so the ones that were having the most difficulty meeting those percentages were, of course, the Title I schools that were located in neighborhoods of poverty, with all the ramifications that go with that. When those percentages, and they went up each year, you're making adequate yearly progress. Well, what are you making adequate yearly progress toward? You're making adequate yearly progress toward improving your percentages of passing in those subgroups until by 2014, you had to be what? Perfect. Who writes a bill like that? Who does that?
Yeah.
So by 2014, this is for the public to really understand and wrap their brain around. This is why this idea of good schools and bad schools is a manufactured myth. It was driven there by No Child Left Behind. The Title I schools, places like Wheatley, Cashmere, Yates, okay, they were having extreme difficulty, and all the elementary schools, Doggett Elementary, which I have some personal experience with. Great school, okay, but oh my gosh, look at the neighborhood that it's in. It's incredible. I mean, the teachers over there are just, they're doing incredible things, but they have incredible challenges.
Yeah.
And they were one of the schools that was on the target list, okay, but they got off. Credit to them, they got off. But, you know, what do the kids really know? They did do better on the test, that's all we know.
That's all we know.
That's all we know. But anyway, so by 2014, they had to be 100%. Everybody had to pass. This is what No Child Left Behind meant. Okay, and when George Bush made that statement that by 2014 all students would be proficient, that meant that all students had to pass. And so they put in AYP matrix, and it was a number of things, but mostly it was those percentages of subgroups that had to pass. And by 2011, we were having a bona fide meltdown in the country. So guess what? We're in the Obama administration now. Okay, Congress could have done away with No Child Left Behind. They could have gotten together and said, "Look, this is bad. Look, it's stupid. What are we doing? Look at this." But they didn't. So Obama came in, riding on the white horse, galloping in, and said, "I've got the remedy. Here it is." So he put in two measures. We were going through an economic crisis at the time. If you'll remember, from 2008, we hadn't recovered. He put in a thing called Race to the Top, which put into effect grants that could be given to states to help them with their education budgets. All right? And then he implemented what was called the U.S. Department Flexibility Package, otherwise known as the waiver. And the waiver relieved the states of having to meet that 2014 deadline of 100%. It took it away.
Yeah.
But guess what? There are conditions applied.
Yeah.
The government is never going to give something without asking something in return, correct? And so what had to happen? You had to adopt Common Core. That put the whole nation on Common Core.
Oh God, I remember Common Core.
The whole nation went on Common Core. Common set of standards which drove the curriculum. They say, well, it wasn't the curriculum. Yeah, the standards drive the curriculum always. So the Common Core was put in, plus you had to link the teacher evaluation to their outcomes on the test, all right? And then each state had to develop their own plan of accountability, of how you would meet these accountability measures. So with that, we moved from, we had George Bush moving, he was like the starting, he wasn't the starting pitcher, he was middle relief, okay? But then Obama comes in as the closing pitcher, and he throws the waiver at the states, and they took it. And who wouldn't take it?
Right.
Okay. So, you want to talk about quid pro quo? That's a quid pro quo.
That's a quid pro quo.
Big time.
Jeez.
So, And that goes on all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. There's all this hullabaloo about it now. It goes on all the time. So the waiver waived the provisions of No Child Left Behind that could not be met. Impossible to meet. But to get it, you had to go to Common Core. And for all of it, all the things that are bad about Common Core, we have it in Texas, although we have a law that says we will never have it in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
It's called College and Career Readiness Standards. That's what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
It's not called Common Core because the legislature said we will not have Common Core. But if you look at the waiver that Commissioner Williams at the time wrote, it said that we would have compliance as much as 92% in ELA, in reading, compliance with our standards being linked to Common Core. All right? It's right there. Yeah, it's not 100%, but it might as well be. And you ask any parent of a kid that is in elementary school, trying to go through math and learn math.
That's so weird now.
That's Common Core math.
Yeah.
Okay? We're not going to be able to have any engineers before long. Because by the time they get to high school, they're going to be, their intuitive knowledge of what math should be is not going to be there. So anyway, if people can just keep that in mind when I say a manufactured crisis and school failure is a manufactured myth, that's what I mean.
Yeah, and now we're seeing, so like this manufactured crisis, No Child Left Behind, a waiver, if you want this waiver, you have to do Common Core. But now we're in the Trump administration with this Betsy. So it's this administration that's really pushing the privatization. Mm-hmm. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So like everything that we're seeing now, like it was all just a matter of time. It was always going to come to this. Because both parties are dismantling public education.
Yeah. And here's an important point that I want to inject. Everybody has their political persuasions, and I lean more Republican than anything else. And I voted for Trump, transparency. But he hasn't done anything with education. And so I see a real problem here. Because, one of the things that President Trump is doing, he's really trying to get a handle on child trafficking. He's really attacking this problem, and he's really trying to attack the pedophilia problem. He's really working on it. People have been arrested in great numbers, like never before. But if you attack that problem, you've got to address education, because you've got to recognize that this system has been broken, and it's been broken by design. And why has it been broken by design? You have to investigate that. Why did they do that? People talk very bad about the public education system and how kids aren't learning anything. Well, that's the idea. Mm-hmm. Okay, teachers are still working very hard, and I'm still very supportive of teachers. Very supportive. But we have to face facts. When you deal in the realm of teaching to the test, there's going to be a lot that the teacher is not going to be able to teach and inject that used to be taught, that's not being taught anymore. Yeah. That's the way it is.
So I want to show you guys, so like we were talking about how privatization is going to be, put upon us. And it's like, okay, well, what does that look like? Like, so whenever you guys go around seeing it, like, what does that look like? So I wrote this article last year in 2018, and it's, Texas laws forces school districts into privatization and holds democracy hostage. So under HB 1842, if the district has a single school that is on the improvement required list for 5 consecutive years, the Texas Education Agency can replace the democratically elected board with appointed managers. Or shut down the school. The escape hatch use SB 1882 to partner the IR5 schools with charters, surrendering governance of staff and curriculum, and T won't replace the democratically elected board with appointed managers. So to make this super clear, the ultimatum that they put school districts in was under HB 1842, you either improve your test scores or the TEA will replace your democratically elected board with appointed managers or close the school permanently. If you don't want to give up democracy, under SB 1882, you can privatize your failing schools and TEA will leave your district's democratically elected board alone. But what this opens up to is like our local school district is like the board of trustees. They have a lot of corruption going on. One of them straight up funded by the Waltons and votes in favor of Teach for America all the time, even though she's got very clear conflicts of interest. And there's like a lot of other nuances going on. But they're using that to say, we're going to take over your school because you're not doing a good job. But the ultimate goal is to privatize. Like that's the ultimate goal. So this is what it looks like here in Texas. I can't speak on what it looks like in other states. But this snuck up, right? So one bill happened one legislative session, and then the other bill happened the next legislative session. It was planned. And groups like NAACP and teacher unions and other places that looked like good guys co-signed this and lobbied for politicians to sign this. But then when you look at it, our local NAACP chapter, that president was involved like on the board of a nonprofit charter that was called like Energy. I have it in an article, but that was trying to charter schools. So like you have to look at the relationships between what we perceive to be the good guys and see if they're actually on the board of these charters. So things to keep in mind. So I just wanted to give you an example of what it looks like in action. So we are ready to take questions. We're about 10 minutes out. So if you have questions, please do that. While they're summoning the questions, you want to take like a minute or two to say something about the book, about another important point you have.
Let's deal a little bit more with the privatization.
Okay.
And people and the planning that goes into this, the planning ahead of time to get ready for it. Okay. I mentioned social impact bonds earlier. We have a gentleman under the direction of Mike Morath, commissioner, named Andrew Hodge. And Andrew Hodge is a Teach for America individual and also worked with KIP. And Andrew Hodge is now the director of social impact bonds for the state of Texas. Okay, so we've got a director that is in charge of coordinating this. Okay, so what does that tell you?
Right.
That tells you that we're moving in this direction. And I think, I'm a part of a group of public education school advocates that, and we all have different things that we bring to the table, and together we make a great mind. So this particular tidbit comes by way of Lynn Davenport from Richardson by Dallas, and Lynn is probably one of the foremost people that is not involved in education and government in any way, that is so knowledgeable about the privatization movement and all the players that are involved in that. And we've got other people in our group that, when I say our group, that we coordinate and talk together and try to keep people up to speed. And I try to keep everybody up to speed on accountability and where it's headed, what they're doing, and others have their specialty. As I mentioned, Steve Swanson is brilliant when it comes to Texas Education Code and a courageous defender of the kid, the child, tremendous defender of the child and how the child is being ignored. We have other people like Randy Houchins, and if I can mention Randy just for a minute. Randy lives in Leander, and he has been to the State Board of Education 15 times to talk to Don Borovich, the president of the State Board of Education, and the other members of the State Board about what is going on with Common Core math. And he has been courageous and relentless in doing this. Guess what? Nothing. Crickets. Thank you for being here, Randy.
Yeah, sounds right.
Okay, and I mean, he's so articulate. He has brought in experts, mathematicians. Randy is an engineer. He knows what he's talking about. Mechanical engineer, all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he knows math. And he's brought in mathematicians, Dr. Milgram, for example, that came before the state board and spoke on the evils of this particular math program and how it's completely rewiring the child's mind in a way that it's not going to make math intuitive. It's going to make math incomprehensible as you move forward. And it's going to be, we're going to see tremendous ramifications of what is happening in our math programs as we go further in time. And why I cannot understand why every superintendent is not beating down the governor's door saying we've got to change it.
It's easier to kiss butt. Okay, so
or protect your pension.
We have a couple of questions. Okay, so there's one question over here from Mornelli the Calix. My question to the guest is, as an educator, do you believe we should encourage students to pursue education as a career? Why or why not?
Well, if we don't have any teachers, then all we're going to be left with is teacher aides and a computer. That's what we're going to be left with. And I think that would suit the politicians just fine. Mm-hmm. That would make them happy. And think of the money that would save.
Yeah.
If you only have to pay a teacher aide and then buy the device.
Yeah.
We're doing pretty good budget-wise with that program.
Yeah.
No, I encourage people to continue to pursue education as a career. We need good teachers. We cannot give up on the teacher. Hopefully, at some point in time in the future, we'll reach a tipping point and we'll be able to change it.
Yes. Yeah. Hopefully. And we have one more question from JJ Barrios. How do you plan on changing the Republican Party's viewpoint on educational issues? Do you think chosen candidates will listen and make this a bipartisan issue? And I mean, this can go to Democrats as well, because Democrats and Republicans are dismantling education.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What to do about changing the platform? See, this is the platform. If the Republican Party platform is school choice, standardized test, teaching to a rating, that's the Republican Party platform. And opening up the door for privatization, because the system is so bad. We owe it to the children. We owe it to the children to completely privatize education. See, that's got to change.
Yeah, that's not.
So
yeah.
The way it changes is for the public to demand that it changes. Mm-hmm. And then perhaps the Republican Party will listen to them and realize if Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Patrick are not careful, their stance on education is going to turn Texas blue. And that is as real as I can make it.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up, since that's all the questions. So if you're listening to this and you feel completely helpless, it's okay, so this is happening. The accountability systems are Orwellian. My students' data is, my kids' data is up for grabs, and I don't know what to do. So if you're in Houston, you should follow HISD Parent Advocates. You should get into all of the stop taps. There's a group called Opt Out of Tax. It's a statewide group where you can get information on how to opt out of tax. And if you're not in Texas, the best thing I can encourage you to do is use social media as a tool. So use these keywords. I don't know what standardized tests you have in your state. We have tax, but
we have STAR.
We have STAR now. Oh. We have STAR now. Opt out of STAR.
Another Orwellian term.
Another Orwellian term. Yeah. Use those keywords in your Facebook search. So you can go in your Facebook search, type that in, and see what groups are related. And you could do that on Twitter. You can do that on Instagram. All of these terms you can look and then you can join these groups, and then you can follow to see when there's meetings and whatnot. Because the chances of there already being a group in your area is really, really high, but you just have to like look for it. And the best tool, like I got into activism by using social media, because I was like, that's not right. How do I get into that? And then I just looked up groups and pages where they were already doing something about it. So I really encourage you to do that if you're feeling super helpless about this topic, because grassroots organizing is where it ultimately is going to be at. So here's our checklist. If you haven't already, please like this live stream. Become a member of Status Coup, statuscoup.com/join. You will always get content, always, always, always. But as a member, you get behind the scenes content with Jordan and Jen and Colin. You should follow us on Twitter at Status Coup. There's at Jordan, but I'm at Sam the Mullet. Business in the front, party in the back. Exactly what it sounds like. I have purple hair that you can't see. That's my mullet. Subscribe to that podcast, Status Coup Podcast. Join our email list, statuscoup.com. And then you should also follow All Real Radio. That's the podcast studio I'm out of. And they have like the app, the All Real Radio app. Text alerts. If you like what we're doing here, text Coup, COUP, to 474747, and you will get breaking news alerts and live notifications. Since I'm still trying to figure out like what my live schedule is looking like, you're not going to get live notifications of when I go live, but you will get live notifications when Jordan goes live. And I really encourage you to sign up for this, because as you guys know, if you're following Status Coup, Jordan's been doing a lot of work with Flint. Him and his work with Jen has exposed a lot of stuff happening in Flint, and they have another piece that is really, really messed up. I can't talk to you much about it because, I mean, they're still in the process of trying to get everything lined up to publish it. But if you sign up for this text alerts, you'll be the first people to know. So that's all I really got. Let me see if there's anything else in here. Good guys, no one's left anything. And we're good. So you guys have a good day, and we will see you later. Bye.